Hi, everybody. Wave if you can hear me. All right, very good. Welcome to our free Zoom evening. We do one of these every few months as a way of getting all the basic information about pre-birth planning out to as many people as possible. If you have not encountered my wife before, Liesel is an empath and a channel. She channels a group, a collective consciousness we affectionately call the Beings of Light, or the BOL for short. And she's going to start us off with a brief centering meditation.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. All you beautiful souls out there all over the world. So let's just take some time to get centered and grounded, get connected. So if it's safe to do so, you can gently close your eyes. Become more in tune with your breathing. That beautiful in-breath, followed by the out-breath. That beautiful tide of life. Beautiful rhythm. And on that out breath, just letting go all that is not this moment right here, right now. Letting go of past and future. Letting go of the commotion of the day. Just anchoring right here, right now. And on the in-breath, breathing in this now moment, this sacred moment, this now moment as it is unfolding in your awareness is absolutely unique and sacred and will never be exactly the same again. And you are bearing witness to it. As part of the one being, the one field of love and light that permeates all, that interconnects all beings, all forms, all experiences, all phenomenon. And just bringing some awareness to the soles of your feet and just allowing in that beautiful healing energy of Mother Earth, that nourishing energy of Gaia, allowing her to move fully into you, to resource you, replenish you, fill your body with her essence of life force. Just inviting in, welcoming that energy all the way into the body, all the way up to the very top of the head. And there at the top of the head, welcoming a beautiful column of divine white light source energy, pure beingness, pure formless awareness. Just allowing this energy in, this energy that is you, that is the deepest, truest you. Allowing this energy to permeate your being, filling your body, resourcing it, reminding it of the truth of who and what you are. Allowing this energy fully and completely in. Just feeling that fullness of your being, bringing some awareness to the heart space, just anchoring some awareness there. As we move into this time of sharing and giving information, just keep some awareness there in the heart space. There's great intelligence there, and greater intelligence even in the mind. And this is where truth can truly be known. This is your barometer to know truth in the world, the intelligence of the heart. So gently coming back, gently beginning to open your eyes, coming back into full, awake, alert awareness, present, feeling yourself in your body fully, here and now. Bringing attention to the screen and grateful for this gift of time we get to share with one another.
Thank you, Liesel. Thank you, Beings of Light. And those of you who enjoyed what the Beings of Light had to say just now, many of the channelings are publicly available at the website, which is yoursoulsplan.com. Not all of them, but many are. Just click on channelings in the main menu. So I know some of you have been with us before. Most people have not. What we like to start off the free meetings with are the basics about pre-birth planning. And for those of you who have heard this information before, think of it as a good review. Bear with me. If you're not interested in a review, go get some ice cream. It's almost summer. Or put your Fitbit on, walk around the block, get some more steps in for the day, come back in 15 minutes or so. So there are 5 main reasons that I have found in my research for my 3 books that explain why we as souls plan big challenges before we're born, before we come into body. The first reason is balancing and releasing karma. It's important for you to understand that balancing and releasing karma are not the same thing. Balancing karma means you plan to have a new experience that energetically offsets a previous experience. Releasing karma means that you heal the underlying tendency that created the karma in the first place. In other words, if all you do is balance karma without also releasing it, you'll just end up recreating the same karma over and over again. An example of a balancing karma would be, let's say that 2 people had a past life together in which one was ill and the other was the caregiver. When those 2 people leave that lifetime, get back to the other side and have their life review, as we all do when an incarnation is over, they'll see the caregiving relationship portrayed in the life review. And when they see this, they may or may not feel complete with the caregiving relationship. They decide for themselves, we're complete with that kind of experience or we're not. They're not told by God or their spirit guides or some counsel external to them, you have karma here, you need to balance this, you need to do more work with this. They decide for themselves, as we all do with every experience, we're complete with that or we're not. If they feel complete with the caregiving relationship, then as I understand it, there is no karma, and they'll go on to plan something new and different in the next incarnation. But if one or both feel incomplete for any reason with the caregiving relationship, that feeling of incompletion is the karma. So let's say they feel that way. What can they do to balance the karma? Well, the easiest and most direct thing to do is just to trade places. So now the one who was ill will plan to be the caregiver. The one who was the caregiver will plan to have an illness. What makes this so interesting and so challenging, I think, is that when those two souls get back into body, they won't remember the pre-birth plan, just as most of us don't. So the challenge becomes, how do we give and receive love unconditionally in these very difficult circumstances of self-induced amnesia? When I talk about giving and receiving love unconditionally, the flow of love in the world is circular in nature. If you cut that circle in half of it is giving love to other people. We all believe this is a good thing to do, and we all try to do this. But it's actually only half the circle. The other half of that circle is receiving love from others. So if you are someone who does not allow others to give love to you, you're actually blocking the flow of love in the world just as effectively as if you never give love to anyone else. And this, I think, is particularly relevant for a caregiving situation, because in my opinion, it's incumbent upon the one who is ill to receive love from the caregiver. So that's reason number one for planning big challenges before we're born: balancing and releasing karma. The second reason is healing. And I'll share with you a story from my first book, Your Soul's Plan. There's a chapter in Your Soul's Plan about the pre-birth planning of deafness and blindness. The deafness story is about a young woman. She was 24 at the time I spoke with her for the book. She was born completely deaf in both ears. We went into her pre-birth planning session and actually heard the conversation she had with her spirit guide when the deafness was planned. And what we found out as we listened to that conversation is that in the lifetime immediately prior to this one, she had the same mother she has in this lifetime. And in that past life, when she was a young child, she heard her mother shot to death by the mother's boyfriend. Now, she didn't actually see the murder, but she heard the gunshots that led to her mother's death. As you would expect, she was quite traumatized by that, so much so that it led her to suicide later in that lifetime. So she returned to spirit from that incarnation with what you could call an energy of unhealed trauma, which now has to be healed. In her pre-birth planning session, her spirit guide says to her, "My dear, would you prefer to be born deaf so that you will be able to heal from that experience and so that you will not be traumatized by any further sounds of that nature?" And she responds, "Yes, that is what I want and what I wish to do." And then what ensues is a fascinating dialogue between her and her spirit guide in which they work out the details of the deafness. So the deafness is chosen here as a tool to facilitate healing. It isn't a random challenge. It isn't a meaningless challenge. She's not victimized by deafness. She chose this herself out of great love and great wisdom to facilitate her healing in the current lifetime. That's reason number two for planning challenges before we incarnate: healing. The third main reason is service to others. If you read spiritual or metaphysical literature, you've probably heard of the concept of oneness. This is the idea that there's actually only one being in existence in the universe. It's you, it's me, it's all of us. Each one of us is an individualized expression of the one. The way I understand the orientation towards service, which, by the way, is in literally every single pre-birth plan I've ever looked at, it's always there in some form or another. The way I understand that orientation is that it's a natural reflection of oneness consciousness, which is our natural state of consciousness when we're home back on the other side. In other words, let's say that you and I are back on the other side and we're planning a lifetime together, and you perceive that I am literally you. It's not just a concept the way it is here. You actually experience that I am literally you. Well, then, of course, you will want to be of service to me. And conversely, if I experience that you are literally me, then, of course, I will want to be of service to you. So this orientation towards service, I think, is a natural reflection of oneness consciousness, which is our natural state of consciousness when we're home on the other side. That's reason number 3 for planning big challenges before we incarnate, a desire to be of service to others. The 4th reason, and I think this is probably the big one out of the 5, is a desire to experience contrast. And let me explain what I mean by this. The non-physical realm that we come from, as I understand it, is a realm of total light and total unconditional love. I've had a spiritually transformative experience earlier in this lifetime in which you could say that I was caused to know. I was caused to know that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love. So if our non-physical home is a realm of total, pure, unconditional love, and if we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love, that means that when we're back home on the other side, we experience no contrast to ourselves, which in turn means we don't fully understand or appreciate who or what we are. We don't fully understand what it means to be a soul made from the energy of unconditional love. So I think what the soul is doing here on the physical plane is that we've come for the experience of what you could call the not love, which we would all agree there's a lot of. Because through the experience of the contrast, the not love, by the time you go home at the end of an incarnation, you have a much more profound understanding of what unconditional love really and truly is, which is another way of saying you now have a much more profound self-knowing. I realize this is a somewhat arcane concept. So to make it more accessible, I like to borrow an analogy from a book other than one of my own. Sure, many of you are familiar with the Conversation with God books by Neale Donald Walsch. In one of those books, the idea of experiencing contrast comes up. And God asks Neale to explain it using the analogy of the white room, which goes like this. Imagine that you are a white being in a white room. So you are white. The ceiling is white. The floor is white. All the walls around you are white. Everything in this room is white, including you. Now, if you are such a being in such a room, how do you know that you're white? The answer is you don't. And in fact, you can't until you experience something that is other than white. Then once you've had that experience, you understand much more deeply what it means to be a white being in a white room. This, I think, is what the soul is doing here on the physical plane. We are love. We are in a realm of only love. We therefore experience no contrast to ourselves. We therefore don't fully understand who or what we are. And so we come here for the contrast, the not love, because through that experience, by the time you go home at the end of a lifetime, you understand much more deeply what unconditional love is, which means you have a much more profound self-knowing. That's reason number 4, experiencing contrast. And the 5th and final reason for planning big challenges before we're born, strictly speaking, this is a subset of number 2, healing, but it's so important, I always break it out as a separate item of its own. And that is healing or correcting false beliefs or false feelings about the self. And let me explain how this works. Almost everyone has had at least one past life, and usually many, in which certain things happened that caused you to pick up a false belief or false feeling about yourself. When I say false, I mean false from the perspective of your soul. 2 of the most common false beliefs or feelings about self are 1, that one is powerless, and 2, that one is unworthy or perhaps even worthless. If you feel or believe yourself to be powerless, unworthy, or worthless, to your soul that feels discordant. In other words, your soul knows that those feelings or beliefs are simply not true. Your soul knows that no being is powerless. On the contrary, we're infinitely powerful. And your soul knows that no being is unworthy or worthless. On the contrary, all beings are infinitely worthless. In fact, from your soul's perspective, strictly speaking, it really doesn't even make sense to talk in terms of worthy and unworthy, because those are relative terms. They only actually make sense if some beings are worthy and others are unworthy. It's like the concepts of tall and short. Those concepts are only meaningful because people are of different heights. If everybody were exactly the same height, nobody would be tall and nobody would be short. So from your soul's perspective, the feeling or belief that you're unworthy or worthless doesn't even make sense. So if you have one of these false feelings or beliefs about yourself, your soul wants you to heal it while you're incarnate. Now, how does that happen? Well, what will happen here in the physical realm is that you will magnetize or call to yourself experiences that seem on the surface to confirm the false feeling or false belief. This is actually a fundamental function of life in the physical realm. The world is set up to mirror you and back to you so that you can become aware of what is within your consciousness, even if it's subconscious, and then bring it to the light of conscious awareness where you can then set about releasing or healing it. So if you feel or believe yourself to be powerless, unworthy, or worthless, you'll draw to yourself experiences that seem on the surface to confirm that. Now, I realize what I'm describing here might sound harsh and perhaps even punitive, but I can assure you it is not the universe's intention to be either harsh or punitive. The universe is loving. And what it's trying to do in its infinite love for you is mirror you back to you so that you find out what lies within you. And if there's something there that's false, something there that's discordant, something there that needs to be released or healed, you can then release or heal it. That's reason number 5 for planning big challenges, releasing or healing or clearing false beliefs or feelings about oneself. Now, there's a relatively new piece that I've started speaking about in regard to these 5 reasons, which you may not have heard before, even if you heard me talk about the 5 reasons. And that is that if we were to spend a lot of time, hours and hours perhaps, talking about those 5 reasons, at the end of that conversation, you might very well say something to me like, okay, Rob, I can understand now why some souls plan mild or moderate challenges. That actually makes sense. But I still just can't wrap my mind around the idea, for example, that anyone would plan to be a parent who loses a child. That kind of suffering is so intense, so horrific. I just still can't wrap my mind around the idea that anybody would plan something like that. And if you were to say that to me, you would be absolutely right. It's actually not possible for the mind to understand that because the mind, and I'm talking here about the ego mind, not the one mind or the super mind, the ego mind would never make a decision like that. How does the ego mind make a decision? Well, generally, it does a cost-benefit analysis. What am I going to get out of this experience? What will it cost me? Is it going to be worth it? That's not primarily how decisions are made on the other side when you are planning your life or your life challenges. The ego mind is not your operating system on the other side. What is? The heart. And the heart wants one thing and one thing only, and that is to give and receive love fully and freely. So let's say, for example, that someone had a number of life reviews and they came away from these feeling that they just wanted to be a more loving person. Perhaps they hadn't been quite as loving or quite as compassionate as they wanted to in a past life. And they really wanted to make a lot of progress quickly in one incarnation. Someone who has that as a pre-birth intention might very well plan a challenge like losing a child. The reason for that is that it's so painful that it actually breaks the heart open. And once it's open like that, it can give and receive love fully and freely. Again, it's not a logical decision. It's not a decision the ego mind would make, but it is a decision the heart would make. The other thing you have to keep in mind about decisions like that, your perspective on the other side is very, very different than it is when you're here in body. One of the main differences is that from the other side, you know that a lifetime is actually very brief. It's here and it's gone like a clap of thunder. Once you're in body, especially if you've had a heartbreaking experience like losing a child, it can surely seem to go on and on. But from the non-physical vantage point, you know that a lifetime is actually very brief. Another difference in perspective, when you're back on the other side planning your life, you know that nobody is permanently harmed by anything that happens here. You may or may not be aware of that while you're here in body, but you do know that when you're back on the other side. And the third key difference in perspective is that when you're on the other side, you know that the growth, the wisdom, the learning, all the things, all the treasures that can be extracted from a lifetime, you know that they will become part of you literally for all eternity. Again, you might or might not know that when you're here in body, but you do know that back on the other side. So from that perspective, a lifetime is very brief. No one is permanently harmed by anything that happens here. And yet the wisdom, the growth, the expansion, the healing become part of you literally for all eternity. From that perspective, it actually does make sense that some souls, not all, some would choose very, very great challenges. So that's an overview of pre-birth planning. Before we go on to take some questions, and I'm going to start first with ones that were submitted in writing in the registration form, and then we'll take some live questions. I want to take just a couple minutes to tell you about a workshop we're offering next week. It's on June 2nd, is that right, Liesel, Stephanie?
Yes, it's June 2nd.
June 2nd. One-day workshop. The first half is something called the Divine Virtues exercise. So what I found in looking at many, many pre-birth plans for the 3 books, a lot of times when great challenges were being planned, the discussion in the pre-birth planning session revolved around a soul-level desire to cultivate and then express, while in body, certain qualities that are very important to the soul. I gave these qualities the name Divine Virtues, and over a period of years, I put together a list of the ones that came up the most often in people's pre-birth planning sessions. These are things like compassion, unconditional love, patience, faith, trust, and so on. I think there are now 28 or 29 on the list. From the pre-birth vantage point, you viewed your biggest challenges as providing both the opportunity and the motivation to cultivate the virtues. And half the plan is cultivating the virtues. The other half of the plan is taking the virtues you've cultivated and turning them outward in service to others. And there's that motivation of service to others that I talked about a few minutes ago. So in this exercise, we go through an analytic process in which you can gain insight into it's probably 2 or 3 virtues that you're working on in this lifetime. And once you know that, that is really valuable information to have for 2 reasons. One is it will allow you to look back on your biggest challenges and see deeper meaning and purpose. And that can be profoundly healing. But you can also work with it proactively in the future. Anytime a new challenge comes along, you just say to yourself, okay, I know that I'm in this incarnation to cultivate and express unconditional love, compassion, and faith, for example. Knowing that, how do I work with this new challenge to cultivate and express those virtues? So it has the effect of immediately assigning deeper meaning to an experience that otherwise might appear to be meaningless suffering. That assignment of meaning will greatly reduce the suffering. And perhaps even more importantly, it allows you to go about cultivating and expressing the virtues in a much more conscious, much less arduous manner. So that's the Divine Virtues. And then the second half of the June 2nd workshop is a hypnotic regression, which I will lead. It's to contact one or more loved ones who are back on the other side. And this can be either people or pets. Pets show up just as much as people do. There are many different forms of contacting loved ones on the other side. If the form of contact is telepathic or verbal, it gives you an opportunity to ask the person or the pet any questions you would like to ask, including questions about your pre-birth plan with that person or pet. So we have a discount code for you. Your gift for signing up for the free talk. It's 15% off, and the code is AWAKEN62, the numbers 62. So when you go through registration, just enter AWAKEN62 into the box for coupon code. That'll take 15% off.
Awaken in all caps.
Okay. So let's take some questions here. Go ahead.
Do we want to just mention the between lives regressions that are
Oh,
in?
that is a good point. Actually, one of the questions was, how do I find out my life plan? The way that we can help you to do that is through a form of hypnosis that I've specialized in called the Between Lives Soul Regression, or BLSR for short. That can be done either as a private session or online in a group workshop. It works just as well either way. And we have a BLSR workshop in September and another one in October. And I believe there's early bird pricing available for those now. So this is all on yoursoulsplan.com. Just click on events in the main menu, scroll down, you'll see a list of workshops.
Stephanie, can you remind us what the days are for the September and October ones?
Sorry, let me unmute. Yes, they are September 8th, it's a Sunday, and October 6th, which is a Sunday as well. I'll put the links for those in here too if anybody wants them.
Okay. So let's go to some submitted questions first. Someone writes, how to get connected to soul? Meditate. Meditate, meditate, meditate some more, and then meditate again. That's my advice. There are a lot of other ways, but that to me is the most important. Other things you can do, anything that will raise your vibration. Your soul is at what we could call an ultra elevated vibration. Therefore, anything you do to raise your vibration brings you in closer contact with the whispers of your soul. So that means anything that brings you joy, anything that brings you peace, anything that creates stillness for you, physical and mental stillness. Giving and receiving love obviously raises your vibration tremendously. For a lot of people, being in nature will do it. Liesel, do you want to toss out some ideas?
I think one of the things that you can do that's just very simple is bringing your attention back to the breath, and bringing your attention back to what is present here and now, and also remembering that everything that you experience, whether it be on the external or the external situation, the internal thoughts and feelings, that they are all happening in this, you could call it a infinite, formless, shapeless container of pure awareness that you are. If you actually look back at all your past experience, everything that has happened in your life, it has always happened. There has always been awareness there. That is the one constant. There was the same awareness there, pure awareness, when you first open your eyes as a baby, as there is now. Along the way, you have collected a whole bunch of thoughts and emotions and a whole bunch of things that you have conflated your sense of self with. But all of those things that you conflate your sense of self with and that block your knowingness of this vast energy field that you are, all of those are actually phenomena that are occurring in this field that you are. So if you can bring your awareness back to your awareness, that can be very helpful.
Also, before I go on to other submitted questions, there's a question about suicide in the chat box. I don't have time to discuss this tonight, but there's an entire chapter about suicide in my second book, Your Soul's Gift. And if you are reading the English edition, pay particular attention to pages 410 to 411. Those 2 pages could change your life. That's really all that I can say about it right now, because it would be a long explanation to go into it. But if you know anybody who has lost someone to suicide, or if you yourself had, take a look at that chapter and those 2 pages, 410 to 411 in the English version in particular.
Oh, someone is asking which book.
Your Soul's Gift, which is the second book. Someone asks, why did I come into this lifetime with very few relatives? So this takes us directly back to the divine virtues. One of the divine virtues is something called self-referencing. Self-referencing means that you wanted to learn how to be the highest and best source of wisdom and knowledge for you. You wanted to learn to be the highest and best source of wisdom and knowledge for you. Now, if you think about how most people relate to the others in their family, especially when they're young, especially when you're children, you refer to them, you look to them as sources of guidance, wisdom, and knowledge. That's understandable, especially when you're a child. One reason somebody might plan to have very few relatives is because it puts you in a position that almost forces you and certainly motivates you to become self-referencing. So self-referencing does not mean that you don't ask other people for their opinions. It does not mean that you don't seek out experts when a quote-unquote expert is needed. But if you're asking other people what they think, it means that you have learned to take whatever someone else tells you, run it past your own intuitive filter, and decide, is this truth for you? That's really what being self-referencing is all about. Now, this is by no means the only reason somebody would plan to have few relatives. There could be many, many other reasons, but it's the first reason that occurred to me when I read the question. And so I just wanted to share that with you.
What comes to me as I hear that question is also another potential virtue would be self-love. You know, if you don't have as many people in your family environment to reflect love to you, then you need to, you might be more motivated to cultivate your own internal experience of love. I mean, it really, you know, it's all one being. We are all one being in the first place. So actually, when you get to a really aerial perspective, self-love is in a way the same as love from others. It looks very, very different here in the physical realm, but that could be one thing that's happening with that.
There is another question that was submitted. This person writes, I feel people and it makes me not want to be around people. What can I do to change this? So I'm going to turn this over to the empath here, Liesel. And the beings of light have given her wonderful suggestions about how to be an empath in this world. So Liesel, take it away.
Sure. So yes, it can be very challenging when you pick up on a lot of energy around you. And for many, many years, this was a major, major struggle for me. When I would just doing something like going into the grocery store was potentially just you know, totally spent my day. And one of the things that the beings of light guided me towards is to be sure that you are really, before you go into a social type situation or in a situation where you're going to be interacting with other people and coming into their energy fields, to make sure that you're really connected, really grounded, really connected to source, really in your heart space. And the effect of that is that you end up going into the situation as what you would call a wet sponge instead of a dry sponge. So if you're very empathic, then you could say that you have a sponge-like nature. And, you know, most of the time we just go around and, you know, we pick up everything. But if you are saturated with the energy of source, if you're really connected, then you are going into a situation as what could be called a wet sponge. And so if you think about it, if you have a wet sponge and you try to soak up a spill, it's not going to absorb anything because it's already saturated. And so that's what you, or at least in my case, that's what I found is very, very effective. So for instance, if I'm going to go into the grocery store, after I, you know, pull in the parking lot and park, I sit in my car for a moment and I just, you know, I connect to Mother Earth. I connect up to source through my crown chakra. And I just bring my awareness into my heart. The beings of light give me this sort of little mnemonic of merge in and up before you merge out. So that's how I remember, is to just bring my awareness here inside my heart, bring this sense of connectedness up to source. And then I bring that with me as I go into the grocery store. And then as I'm in the grocery store, I really try to remember that each and every being that I'm encountering is source as well, is God, is their higher self. And no matter what might be happening in terms of the energy that, you know, is coming off at the personality level, they still are also an absolutely divine being as well. And I find that it can be helpful to, when I'm looking at another person, I don't necessarily look above their head, but I just remember to bring like a little bit of my awareness to about like 2.5 to 3 feet above their head, and just take that in as well as taking in the rest of them, what we think of as the person, you know, the body, because that's where more of their soul energy is hanging out, so to speak. And I find that can make a big difference. So now I find, you know, I'm able to go into and out of a grocery store and not feel like I got run over by a Mack truck. So hopefully some of those tips are helpful to you. We actually just finished teaching a whole 7-week course for empaths and intuitives with the Shift Network. So I'm not sure if they're going to put that on. Sometimes the Shift Network will make that an evergreen thing where you can, even when it's not actively, going on, you can buy the recording. So you might check that out from time to time and see if they end up making that an evergreen course, if that's of interest to you.
All right, thank you, Liesel. There are a large number of questions that are all variations on the same question, which is, how do I know what my soul and or my guides are telling me? So it's important to understand that feelings are the language of the soul. The soul is not generally communicating with you in words. Listen to your feelings. In particular, look for feelings of excitement or joy. Excitement and joy are your soul saying, yes, this is the way for you. Keep moving in that direction. Your soul and your guides will also speak to you through aspiration and inspiration. The things you aspire to do and the things you are inspired by, that's guidance. That's coming from your soul, from your guides. You know, we could ask the question, where do people's interests come from? And there could be a large number of answers to that questions. But my answer is that your interests are your guidance. That's coming from your soul, coming from your guides. Liesel, anything you want to add to that?
Well, before it disappears, I just want to mention somebody was asking about living alone as part of their soul's plan, and which one is the book that talks about
That's Your Soul's Love, which is the
okay.
third book. The final chapter of Your Soul's Love is about the pre-birth plan of a woman who planned to be single for almost all of this lifetime. And there are different reasons why she did this, but the main one and the most common one for anybody who has a plan like that, to be alone quite a bit, is to cultivate self-love. Again, from the pre-birth planning perspective, you put yourself in situations facing challenges that are intended to provide you with both the opportunity and the motivation to cultivate certain divine virtues. Self-love is one of the divine virtues. That's a primary motivation for planning that kind of a life. And there are many, many people in Body now who had a pre-birth intention to cultivate self-love in this lifetime. Let's see what else we have here. What is the most certain path out of my everyday pain and suffering? The most certain path, although not necessarily the easiest, is to reduce or eliminate resistance to whatever pain is in your life. So pain and suffering are not the same thing. Pain can be emotional or physical and caused by any number of things. Suffering occurs when you are in resistance to any kind of pain. Resistance is a natural human response to pain. It's not something to judge yourself for. It's not something to feel shame about, but you do want to do something about it. The reason you want to do something about resistance, you want to minimize it, is that when you go into resistance to anything in life, you're energetically giving a big no to the universe. Now, to you, it won't look that way. You think you're saying no just to the emotional or physical stimulus that you find to be painful. But on an energetic level, the way the universe reads you, it doesn't realize that you're trying to say no just to this one thing. All it gets from you is this big, loud, energetic no. And it takes it as a global no. So it takes it as a no to physical health. It takes it as a no to abundance. It takes it as a no to love. It takes it as a no to spiritual clarity. It takes it as a no to every blessing that you actually want in your life. So you've probably heard the expression, when it rains, it pours. That expression describes this phenomenon. Something relatively minor but negative happens in your life. You don't like it, so you go into resistance to it. The minor negative thing is the rain. Once you go into resistance to it, and you're giving this big, loud, energetic no to the universe, as I said, that shuts down the flow of all blessings into your life. Then all kinds of things start to go wrong, and that's when it starts to pour. That's what that expression actually refers to. Now, the average person, in my opinion, doesn't realize that they're in a state of resistance. The reason people don't realize it is that they've been in resistance their entire life. It's like the fish that has always been in water. The fish doesn't know it's in water because it's never not been in water. If you've been in resistance your whole life, then you may not know that you're in resistance. So the first step really is just to become aware of it. Again, there's a difference between pain and suffering. If you're suffering, it's not caused by the pain, it's caused by your resistance to the pain. So all of this is a long-winded way of saying that you've got a lot of good reasons to reduce resistance in any way you can. There are many, many ways to do that. The main thing that we can offer you in terms of reducing resistance is to understand the deeper spiritual meaning and purpose of the challenges you yourself planned before you were born. Once you know that you are the powerful and courageous soul that planned the challenges, and even more so, once you know what the underlying lessons are, then you can start to see the gift in the experience. It starts to make sense. It's no longer meaningless, random, purposeless suffering. Understanding the deeper spiritual meaning of your pre-birth plan will go a long way to reducing resistance.
I think another thing that's really important to note about resistance is the phenomenon that there can be to go into resistance about your resistance, which can really be a rabbit hole. So if you notice resistance in yourself, just notice it. Just allow there to be awareness of it. And anything that is held in a bigger space of awareness, when you're holding resistance in a bigger space of just awareness, of an allowing awareness, then you actually are not in resistance, even though there is this sensation of resistance appearing in awareness. And I'm going to include in when Stephanie sends out the video and everything in the follow-up email, I'm going to include a few channelings that are relevant to what we talked about tonight. And there are two that are really relevant to this topic that Rob just talked about. One is called Expanding the Glass, and the other is called Weeds and Seeds. So check those two channelings out.
Another person has asked, was it my pre-birth plan to lose a child? Something that is that significant is almost 100% part of your pre-birth plan. But it's important to understand here what we mean when we say that something is planned. Very rarely does that mean that it was planned as a certainty. Almost all pre-birth plans, everything in the plan is planned as a possibility or a probability, or sometimes a probability very high, almost certain. Not many things are planned as absolutes. There are some, your choice of parents, for example. Obviously, once you're born, you can't change who your parents are. That's written in stone. That's planned as a certainty. Or, for example, let's say that you are born with a physical handicap that can't be treated by medical science in the time period in which you've incarnated, which is something you would know before you're born. Then that's written in stone, short of what we call a miracle. You'll have that handicap or disability for the duration of that lifetime. But very few things fall into this written in stone category. Most things, again, are possibilities or probabilities. Whether or not something that you planned actualizes, goes from being possibility to reality, that depends on your free will decisions and the free will decisions of other people in your life. So something like losing a child, yes, it's part of the plan. How likely was it? That's going to vary from person to person. I'll share something else with you. I remember in one of the channeling sessions I did with Jesus, in which we were talking about the pre-birth planning of life challenges, he said something very interesting. He said, whenever something happens in your life and you think to yourself, this should not be happening, that thought is almost always a sure sign that it's something you yourself planned before you were born. So if you've had that thought, there's your answer.
Another thing that I want to share is that, you know, when we talk about your pre-birth plan, there's not just one plan. There's actually a multitude of plans, and they vary according to vibration. And there's another channeling that I'm going to send out that's from the beings of light that explain this with this wonderful analogy. They use the analogy of a stack of sheets of paper. And if you think about what is the whole purpose of a pre-birth plan in the first place, it's to elevate your consciousness. It's to expand your consciousness, to raise your vibration. So these pre-birth plans, if you think of each one as a sheet of paper, they vary according to vibration. And so you could think of on the bottom of the stack are the heaviest, densest vibration plans. At the top are the highest vibrational plans. Up here is learning much more through peace and joy and love. Down here is learning much more through pain and suffering. And one of the amazing things is that if you start to expand your consciousness, if you start to raise your vibration on your own, if you start to consciously evolve, you can actually up level your plan that you're accessing. So because the whole purpose of the plans is to raise your vibration, if you start doing that on your own, then you don't need some of these plans that are down here. So that's also one of the reasons why you want to really start consciously evolving and doing things like cultivating your divine virtues, is because you're going to start raising your vibration and you're going to start accessing these higher vibrational life plans, because there's not the need for the same difficult challenges that there maybe would have been otherwise.
There's also a question, are pets part of our pre-birth plans? The answer is yes. There's an entire chapter about the pre-birth planning we do with pets in the second book, Your Soul's Gift. The story there, it's about a woman, a soul who plans for reasons of her own to be a dwarf in this lifetime. She's 4 feet, 8 inches tall. So she puts this plan into place. And then in her pre-birth planning session, her guides say to her, you know, this is going to be very difficult, especially when you're a child, because the other children are going to tease and ostracize you. We need to put supports in place to get you through this difficult experience. What do you want them to be? And the plan that they come up with is for her to be surrounded as a child by all of these unconditionally loving pets. Then the pets come into the pre-birth planning session. So there are dogs, there are cats, there are horses. There's even a rooster whose name is Crooked Beak. And these animals come in and they talk with great intelligence and much love about how they're going to support her unconditionally through the experience of being a dwarf. And that's exactly how it played out. She would come home from school in tears because the other kids were teasing her so severely. And she had, as a child, the ability to communicate telepathically with the pets. So, for example, she would hear her horse say to her, come on, climb on my back and let's go ride like the wind. And then they would do that together. And that love got her through that very difficult experience. Okay, let's go to some live questions. Before we do, I just want to mention again, the website is yoursoulsplan.com. And I invite all of you, if you're not already on the email list, sign up for the newsletter when you go there. For various legal reasons, we do now have to turn the recording off.